Hey everybody, so I am back today and something has happened, and I'd have to say that I'm a little bit humbled and I feel a little foolish and I'm extremely excited, all kind of wrapped in one. For those of you that are subscribers of the channel that watched my recent video on Heresy Hump Day, you'll know that I just had a little bit of a discussion about how I'm kind of slightly pulling back from the channel, or at least plan on doing things a little differently, and I don't really know that that's changed. But, you know, I kind of talked a little bit about how I needed to allow more room in life for other things because I'm just so focused on the miniatures hobby and my pastime, and I just need to open up some more room for that. Well, the stars have sort of aligned in a really weird way, and that is I got a text from my buddy Jankmaster, that many of you probably know from YouTube and from the channel from comments, that there is this thing coming out called, he goes, Crisis Protocol, and he texts me, and I'm thinking, I have no idea what that is. Is there something that on the news that I should know about? You know, it sounds like something important in the world, like what's going on. And so I kind of inquired, and he says, new Marvel game. Now, wait a second. Many of you know, going back in the last couple of years, that I invested a lot in the Night Models Universe Marvel game, and that was quite a interesting experience for me. I got out of it a whole lot of awesome miniatures. I was, put a lot of time into a Marvel board. I love the Marvel Universe from when I was a little kid with the comics. I've never stopped liking it. I also love miniatures, so when that game came out, it was quite an amazing thing for me, and quite a disappointment that it didn't turn out to be what I wanted it to be. That's always, I think, you run the risk of that when you're really invested in something. But, actually after all of that, and I don't think this has any relation to what has happened, but a number of people, including myself, had wondered whether, with Disney owning the Marvel license, whether Fantasy Flight Games, who actually has an involvement with Star Wars, owned by Disney, might pick up that license after Knight dropped it. And I actually wrote an email to Fantasy Flight Games asking them, hey, are you guys considering this? Just as sort of a customer input thing. And turns out that's not exactly what's happened, but it's not completely off the walls either. So at Gen Con yesterday, it was revealed and I guess shown, right, Gen Con, that there is a Crisis Protocol, Marvel Crisis Protocol miniatures game. And so what I'll do is I'll actually throw up on the screen some of this stuff as we're talking about it. And so this is essentially being put out there by Atomic Mass Games, which I believe is a new company. My understanding, just from reading on forums, is that the gentleman that may be highly involved with this company had involvement with War Machine in the past and has done other things within the miniature gaming hobby. And so, interesting. Fantasy Flight Games happens to be the company that hosted this. And so apparently there may be some sort of partnership between the two on this, but I am also under the impression, from what I've read on the forums, is that they're both associated with Mobius Games, I think it is. I probably have that wrong. And so all of that is very interesting. Now, a lot has actually been put out about this, much more than I would have thought of just on initial release. Now, as you can see on the screen here with the photo I'm looking at as you're seeing it on the screen, there is a lot in front of you there of miniatures, really cool looking miniatures. And that right off the bat has me really excited. Now, my understanding is that, I'm going to switch to another screen here. My understanding is that the base game comes with 10 miniatures. Looks like it's somewhat evenly split between heroes and villains, somewhat, and there's supposed to be 2 expansions coming out for the Hulk and MODOK. And so those you can see in the 2 boxes in the back. Starter set is supposedly $99. I'm assuming that's US. And you can see a little picture there, and it's supposed to be coming out in the fall. Now, in a Q&A, apparently the designer had mentioned when asked about scale that it's going to be 40 millimeters. Now, that's probably the only thing that's a bit disappointing about this for me, is that that's sizably bigger than 32, which is what I believe the Night Models game was, and which was actually bigger than 28, which is the normal standard. A lot of my terrain was 28 millimeter, using it just for 32, and then basically a lot of the vehicles that I'd purchased and things were probably sized closer to 32. But and so I do hope that I can actually use my prior terrain and stuff for something like this. But having said that, for this game they are investing in terrain kits and providing terrain kits as well. See if I can show something else here. So here's a picture with like the painted terrain of like the Daily Bugle there on the right and the taxi in the front, and these are supposed to be examples of terrain offerings, and you will see in another picture that this is indeed something they'll be offering. This is unpainted miniatures, which is fine because that's kind of what I'm interested in doing anyway, is painting everything up. And yeah, these look really quite good. I love the look of the posts and the street lights. They look very New York style to me, which is cool, and it's a Daily Bugle there, so I'm assuming that's supposed to be based in New York City, like in the Spider-Man comics. Yeah, I mean, I guess, like I said, I would like to use my old stuff, but at the end of the day, the Marvel stuff's just an automatic buy-in for me. Like, if I see miniatures like this, and it's being done, by a company that may have association with Fantasy Flight games, I think that, and I'll show you some other stuff that's coming up regarding the game and tell you more about the game that they've mentioned. It seems like it has a lot of promise. That's one of the things that I'm really hoping for, is that it's really more thought out than the original game was, or I should say the Night Models universe game. And yeah, like, so another piece here that I can show is the this screen. This is a little bit more of a stage shot where they show again the Daily Bugle in the center. You see some of the painted models that are going to be coming in the set up close. These are probably without the Hulk and MODOK, the actual miniatures you'll be getting in the starter set. I really love like the Dr. Octopus on the top there. That's a particular miniature that I've always liked to see from Marvel. I just think he's so classic Spider-Man villain. He looks really good there. They've done a really good job. Very cool looking Ultron, and really like the look of Iron Man there. Just another pose, which is great. A lot of these miniatures are miniatures that I would have gotten in the last game, but then of course they're adding new miniatures too, and so I expect to see that, where they'll actually have the iconic ones that were focused on in the Night Models game. There's going to be repeats, but then of course there's going to be new miniatures and hopefully expanded, things expanded on. So like we didn't see Ultron, we didn't see MODOK like in the last game, we didn't see Red Skull. Didn't see Baron Zemo there in the bottom right. And so that's really cool. They're kind of mixing it up. And we're seeing like a Captain America that's a bit more the cinematic universe. And as I see it, it looks like they're definitely focusing on the cinematic universe, but also it looks like they're having classic sculpts too, because that MODOK didn't appear yet in the cinematic universe, and he looks very much like the comic. And so having a little bit of both in that regard, I think, is really cool. One thing that I can show is this a shot that we saw of some of the sprues. So this is going to be plastic. Those of you that know that I kind of prefer metal miniatures in general as a hobbyist, but at the end of the day, these miniatures look really good, and I also like plastic and resin, and so I'm quite happy to get these as plastic kits, and particularly for potentially a cool game and some great sculpts like this, as a big Marvel fan. And so we can see the car there on the right, and we can see the MODOK kit there, and it looks like we've got another kit there. I'm not sure on the left. We see some arms and legs. I don't know what that goes to, but I can only speculate. Let me see if I can go to a shot that we have, I believe, from Gen Con of the actual miniature stand that they have showing some. Now here, they actually show a lot more than what you're even getting in the starter set. So it looks like they already have a lot of stuff in production that will come out in addition to MODOK and the Hulk. I do want to go back to a picture of the Hulk in a second just to talk about scale a bit. But if we look here, we can actually see that they already have Guardians of the Galaxy with a really cool Groot and Rocket sculpt, where they have Groot, he looks really dynamic, and then Groot's arm actually coming out of the base and Rocket's miniature with him standing on it. I think that's really cool. Then we have the Hulk and what possibly looks like another Asgardian behind him, which looks really great. So we've already got the Hulk, and then to the the foreground to the right, we can see that Loki's there, which looks like an amazing sculpt where he's sort of flying with some magic below him. Now, I can only speculate on some of these miniatures, but behind Groot, we can see what appears to be Nebula to me there, and then behind her, Gamora, and then we also have Venom to the right. Looks like Winter Soldier is there in the back, and then Vision, which is one that I saw a bit later when looking at this next to Captain America back there, which really looks awesome. You know, just kind of quickly going to the right side of the screen, we can actually see Star-Lord there, another Guardian of the Galaxy, and we see behind Thor like an alternate Spider-Man sculpt, it looks like to me, because we have Spider-Man behind him, and then it almost looks like there's an alternate Spider-Man sculpt there, but I can't quite tell. And so there's actually some others in here as well. So it's very, very cool that there's actually a lot coming, and you can see that there's some other terrain like a garbage truck, and we also, what I was interested in is you can see some templates below, which is very cool. Probably gives an idea a little bit about the game, and because they have these different types of templates, and it looks like perhaps different kinds of powers that they may represent. Speaking of powers, I am just going to go to a screen where they show the cards that'll be coming, that will represent the miniatures. And so they show Baron Zemo, Ultron, and Black Widow. Now, looking at Black Widow here on the right, they show statistics at the top of the card. Very cool artwork, by the way, very comic-oriented, which I think is great. Looks really fun, like when I look at the card. And looks like we have, I can only speculate, but it looks like we have attacks at the top of this card on the right. So they talk about, like, for Black Widow, strike, pistol, and mixed technique. And then below that, it looks like almost like abilities are done separately, where it's got counter strike, martial artist, and stealth. I'm guessing these are more passive abilities that probably are always in effect. I'm not sure. They say in there how it will operate. And so these are neat. I believe his name is Krabak, which has a YouTube channel that does a lot of Armada vids that I do follow. He had actually got in and at Gen Con and looked at a display of this and has a great video up about that. And in that video, he essentially asked about multiple versions of the same character, but by way of asking about multiple miniatures for Iron Man. And they had said, absolutely, the sky's the limit as far as different armor versions. And it is possible, from what I saw there, that we have more than one version of Spider-Man coming. But that probably would mean, I'm guessing, a very specific card for that miniature, possibly with different types of attacks then and abilities, and even stats, potentially. And so that's very cool that, you could have multiple versions in some cases of the same character with a different card. So this looks like a lot of fun. One thing that has been mentioned, I saw in Beast of War, and in a roundabout way I would just describe it, that there's going to be multiple ways to play the game. Sounds like there'll be more traditional player versus player setups, but then they're talking about having a player versus a large, like a villain, where you could have two players versus one villain controlled by a third player, which I thought that was actually pretty neat, where you'd have it like that. Going back to the MODOK screen with the Hulk, that could be where you have these expansions potentially, where you actually have the Hulk, versus, multiple teams, or something like that, or a MODOK, maybe that's will be the way they do it. I like the idea that you could potentially have scenarios, and it sounds like they will have scenarios within the game, but they did mention that it will be 3 foot by 3 foot, and so that's interesting too. My board is 4 foot by 4 foot. I suppose I could sort of just use the center of it, but then again, there'll probably be a plan for, I'm guessing, boards in the game. And so yeah, looks really, really cool. One of the things I wanted to point out, just from what I saw so far, just in some of the artwork, or I should say the presentation they're showing here, is the scale looks like it's a little bit better, or I should say a lot better than the Night Models game. They're on the newer stuff in the Night Models game, they really did try to, I think, get the scale better to each other, but because they started the game with having miniatures for it already, there were certain sculpts like the Thing and Colossus, which were just really out of scale to each other, compared to the comic. Colossus was just a lot smaller, and so the Thing was just quite large, I think, and a lot of folks had trouble with the Hulk and how large he was, and I had a whole video on that once, and it was just, in the sense of the Hulk is different sizes in the comic depending on how angry he is or which artist is drawing him, and at his peak, I would say the Night Models Hulk made somewhat sense, but I think many of us found that, he should be quite a bit smaller on average, to represent the Hulk from the comics across the spectrum, and compared to other characters in the game. And here, I think we're seeing probably closer to a synergy with HeroClix. I always thought was probably much better in some ways at scaling. You never heard as many complaints about it, and I'm a big HeroClix player, but I had played it, and from what I see here, it looks quite a bit better, and I'm hoping that will be the case, that we won't see some just really, really disproportionate looking figures in comparison to each other. And so I think that is mostly what I have to say. I mean, mentioned that it's plastic kits, that it's going to be 40 millimeter in scale. In the game itself, it is also supposed to be very interactive with terrain, and that's something that will be really cool, like any Marvel or any superhero game should be. I think being interactive is much better to represent the comics. So if you can rip up a post or a telephone pole and use it as a weapon, or throw a character into a wall and have it cause damage, those are the kind of things that we want to see. Beyond that, I think that's all I really have to say. Now, for me, I was talking recently about how, for me, for those that follow the channel, my main interests are French-Indian War, historical, and really I've kind of mostly the old Hammer miniatures and finding games to play with them, and painting a lot of old Warhammer miniatures is something I really like. But I've kind of resisted a lot of things over the last bit, other than Infinity and wanting to get back into that. I've kind of skipped on Star Wars Legion because I just had a lot of other stuff to do, even though it looked good. I didn't get into it. When they re-released Lord of the Rings, even though I love the franchise and I love Lord of the Rings, I didn't get into it because I just have a lot of other things that I want to do. And there's a number of things I've said no to. I haven't really gotten into any of the GW stuff recently at all. But one of the things that I always knew was that the moment they release a decent Marvel game, and I'm hoping this one will be, but based on miniatures alone, it looks extremely good, that it's an automatic for me. Because Marvel is just something, as somebody that likes miniature games and somebody that loves Marvel, it's really difficult for me to resist this, even to just paint them alone. I'm really hoping that it'll be a nice, fun game, that we'll enjoy it. Maybe it'll be something I can play with the kids, who knows, because they like Marvel as well. I don't know that I'm gonna try to bring news to the channel as I see it come up for this, because I'm pretty definite at getting that I'm going to be getting this. Whether or not I'll have it all painted immediately to be the first bat rep, I doubt that's going to happen, because I've got a lot of stuff to do. But you'll definitely be seeing more of this on the channel. I'm really excited about it, and I'll definitely be in there as far as having the discussion about this. So I hope you guys are excited about this too. I'm kind of really surprised that just after I thought I was going to be easing up a bit on hobbying and things like that, this comes out and it's just reinvigorated me again. Having said that, I kind of want to continue with the stuff that I've been doing, like the French Indian War and Old Hammer, and I'm anticipating this stuff to be coming out. So, all right, everybody. Hope you guys are having a good one, and talk to you later.